Akatsuki, one of the most prolific groups in anime history. Whether it be villains or good guys, the Akatsuki rise above them all. Whether it be because of their unique abilities, their gripping battles, their lofty goals, or their gory deaths, no one can say that the Akatsuki are anything less than iconic. And while many things pertaining to their plot made them an incredible group, their role in the story and their character design is what truly cemented them as one of the greatest groups in anime history. And for the culmination of all of those reasons, that is why the Akatsuki's name will be cemented in the history of anime for generations to come. See, because whether it comes down to their patented Akatsuki cloaks with their iconic red clouds, the straw hats they wore to hide their identity, or the rings they wore on their fingers to signify their role within the organization, each member of the organization had an incredibly unique character design. But we all understand that Hidan is different from Kisame because one of them is a sociopath with a scythe and a penchant for death, while the other is a shark with a penchant for friendship. What a lot of people don't understand about the Akatsuki is that one of the biggest ways that they differentiate from each other is one of their most subtle character design choices, and that would be their rings. See, the Akatsuki rings are one of the most understated character design choices ever in all of anime. And yet, these incredibly understated character design choices are a staple to the design of every single member of the Akatsuki. A lot of people don't know the stories behind each of these rings, and that's not necessarily their fault. As if you don't know Japanese lore, Chinese astrology, and kanji, there's really no way for you to figure out what these rings mean. However, the placement and message of every single one of these individual rings reflects the character who's wearing it, and thus by understanding what these rings are saying and what they reference, we're able to understand the characters that are wearing these rings a little bit better. And since everybody always loves hearing more and more about the Akatsuki, that is exactly what we're going to be doing today, telling you all about the message behind the Akatsuki rings. Or more specifically, today we're going to be going through every single member of the Akatsuki and telling you what their ring means and how it ties into their character. But before we get to doing any deep dives on jewelry, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you like the idea of me doing deep dives into things that seem relatively non-consequential, then you're gonna love my other channel, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about Naruto and Boruto, I talk all other anime. And if you really want to hear me talk about some non-consequential stuff, then go ahead and follow my anime podcast, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Or if you want to look like somebody of great consequences, then go ahead and meander on over into my merch store, otakusanonymous.net, where you can pick up some of the greatest anime t-shirts, sweatshirts, and sticker packs known to man. So, there's really no order in which to go through the Akatsuki. I guess technically I could try and go through the Akatsuki in the order in which they joined, but that's fairly hazy. We don't know for certain when certain members joined. And I guess we could go off power, but I don't remember exactly where I sorted all the members of the Akatsuki in terms of power, and it's been about 2 years since I made that video. So we're just gonna start with my favorite characters and then just kind of work our way down from there. That's not to say that the people at the end of the video are gonna be my least favorite characters. I'm gonna start the video now. And we're gonna start this video off by talking about my favorite member of the Akatsuki, Pain. Yahiko, Nagato, you get it. See, Pain wears his Akatsuki ring on his right thumb. And in fact, while I have you here, technically the placement in each and every single one of these rings doesn't really reflect on the character at all, as the placement of where each individual member of the Akatsuki wears their ring actually only pertains to one thing. And that one thing is to denote to the Akatsuki member wearing the ring as to where they stand in relation to the Gedo statue when extracting tailed beasts from Jinchuriki. So if you're wearing your ring on your right thumb, you stand on the right thumb of the Gedo statue. And thus, while there might be some deeper meaning as to why individual members of the Akatsuki wear their rings on individual fingers is for the extraction of tailed beasts. And this explains why every single member of the Akatsuki wears their ring on a different finger. As if two people wore their ring on the same finger, well then they'd be standing on the same finger of the Gedo statue during the tailed beast extraction, and nobody wants that. Now to get to the more important aspect of Pain's ring. See, the kanji on Pain's ring says zero, or rei in Japanese. And it's important to remember here that the person wearing the ring isn't Nagato or any other members of the Six Paths of Pain outside of the Deva Path, and the Deva Path is Yahiko. And thus, the reason that Yahiko is wearing his yellow Akatsuki ring on his right thumb with the kanji of zero is because Yahiko is the starting point of the Akatsuki, like how zero is the starting point of positive numbers. And it's because Yahiko was the original founder of the original Akatsuki, and thus through the medium of his ring, he's being denoted as its founder. And now after Pain / Yahiko, we have my second favorite person in the Akatsuki, Itachi, who wears his red-colored ring on his right ring finger. Now Itachi's kanji reads shoot, which can be directly translated to either crimson or scarlet, which could either be a reference reference to his red eyes, the Sharingan, or the amount of blood that Itachi's had to spill in order to get to the point in which he's currently at, as Itachi was obviously responsible for the assassination of the entirety of his clan. In fact, you could consider both of these points simultaneously, as the assassination of his clan is what caused his eyes to evolve to the MS, and the people that he was assassinating had the same red eyes as him. Really, whichever you decide to go with goes with Itachi's life. However, that isn't all that Itachi's ring might mean, but we're going to circle back to that in a little bit. However, sticking with the theme of red, the next member we're going to talk about is Sasori. Now, Sasori is technically the counter to Yahiko. That is to say that Sasori wears his purple-colored ring on his left thumb. And when it comes down to interesting stories revolving around the rings and their meanings, I would say that Sasori has one of the more interesting stories to tell. Unfortunately, a lot of the interest revolving around Sasori's ring does come from his death. See, the kanji on Sasori's ring says Gyoku, which translates either to spherical gem or jade, depending on the translation, which many believe, as it pertains to Sasori, speaks to Sasori's infinite youth. See, as we all know, Sasori turned his body into that of a puppet, leaving only one living part of his body, his core, or his heart. Because Sasori managed to whittle down his entire existence to just this core, and the rest of his body was a puppet that didn't age, Sasori unlocked essentially infinite youth, which many compare to Sasori making his body like that of a jewel, as precious minerals like jade are known for their ridiculously long lifespans, being able to survive in a singular shape for millennia. However, after Sasori dies, somebody else inherits his ring, and that somebody else is Toby, or Obito, for those of us in the know, which would lead some of you to believe that possibly the jewel analogy applies to Obito as well. And technically, I guess there is a way it could apply to Obito, as half of Obito's body is Hashirama's cells, which should hypothetically slow his aging, and therefore, because half of his body is Hashirama's cells, he should stay alive longer than your standard person. But for all intents and purposes, it appears as though, even though half of his body is Hashirama's cells, Obito ages just like everybody else. As when he's finally demasked, he looks just as old as Kakashi, and thus it appears as though really the only thing that Hashirama's cells help Obito with is with regeneration. So really, when it comes down to it, the jewel infinite youth analogy doesn't really work with Obito. But fortunately for all of us, kanji is ridiculously complicated, and Gyoku actually has a second meaning within the confines of shogi, which is the game that Shikamaru is always playing, the Japanese equivalent of chess. And Gyoko in shogi actually translates to the jeweled general, which is the shogi equivalent of the king in chess, which would make sense when you consider the fact that Obito is the actual leader of the Akatsuki, and that when you take down Obito, you take down the Akatsuki, as even though the original founder of the Akatsuki, Yahiko/Nagato, was taken out prior to Obito, the Akatsuki still existed. Thus, because Gyoko has two meanings, it applies to both Sasori and Obito, which I find just really cool. Now, after Team Double Entendre, we have Konan, and Konan starts a rather interesting tangent for us. See, Konan is possibly part of a four-person connection in terms of rings meanings. That is to say that Konan is one part of four members of the Akatsuki whose rings are all related, or her ring and the other three members of the Akatsuki's rings are all completely unrelated. It really boils down to how you want to translate the kanji. See, Konan's white Akatsuki ring that she wears on her right middle finger reads Byaku, which translates to white, which some believe to be a reference to Konan's paper abilities, or her white angelic wings. In fact, within the confines of the Hidden Rain Village, Konan is known as Lady Angel. The entirety of the Hidden Rain Village views her as just that, an angel, who supposedly disposed of the evil Hanzo and is leading them into a new generation of power and light for their village. But there is a separate possibility. See, there is a possibility that her ring refers to Byakko, not Byaku. See, Byaku is what? Byakko is a god, specifically one of the four Chinese gods who plays a massive role in astrology and geomancy. See, Byakko is a white tiger god who is said to be the protector of the West. Now, the idea of Byaku was made through ancient Chinese astrology, as Byaku is said to be made out of 27 constellations, which can be seen in the western sky of China at night. And thus Byakko, the white tiger god, is said to be the protector of the West. Now, since the village hidden in the rain is west of Konoha, and Konan's ring and abilities are all white, there's a fair chance that her ring is a reference to this white tiger god, especially when you consider the fact that Konan is considered to be the protector of the Hidden Rain Village and of Nagato. But I said there was four members in this four-way of gods, so who's the second member? Well, the second member would be none other than Deidara, who wears his ring on his right index finger. Now, Deidara's kanji reads Sho, which can be translated to blue, which could be a tie-in to his striking blue eyes. Considering the fact that so much of Deidara's character development revolves around eyes, specifically him making eye contact with Itachi and losing in a fight and therefore having to join the Akatsuki, and Deidara training his eyes to become immune to ocular-based genjutsu, which is why he has his one robotic eye. But it's also a possibility that the show is in reference to the other Chinese god, Seiryu, also known as the Azure Dragon. And for those of you who don't know, Azure is a type of blue. Now, Seiryu is the god of the East and the spring season. And now, while the Hidden Stone is technically anything but East, as I actually believe it's the most Western country in the entirety of the Naruto universe, Deidara's abilities do revolve heavily around dragons, specifically his C2 dragon. And thus, there's a fair to good chance that Deidara using dragons is in reference to the kanji of his ring, Seiryu. The third god in this quartet belongs to Zetsu, whose yellow ring on his right pinky finger says Gai, G-A-I, in kanji, which means boar or pig. However, this is widely believed to be either a mistranslation or a misdrawing, as people believe that the kanji symbol was actually supposed to be for Gen, as Gen stands for mysteriousness, which applies to Zetsu a lot more than boar. On top of that, outside of just calling Zetsu mysterious, Gen could also be in reference to Genbu, who is the third out of the four gods we're going to talk about, the Black Tortoise, the protector of the North, which would make a ton of sense for Zetsu, as Zetsu is an entirely black entity, and technically Zetsu is the protector of Kaguya, who exists on the moon. And while obviously North isn't up, it feels as though that could be the thing that Zetsu was said to be protecting. Now, maybe it's a possibility that Zetsu's ring was purposely altered, as Genbu technically already exists in the Naruto universe. You guys remember the island turtle? Yeah, its name is Genbu, but since these are kanji symbols being drawn onto rings, it's not crazy to assume that a stroke was missed and Gen became Gai. But enough about Zetsu, let's get to the last entry on the God Squad. And that last entry would be none other than Itachi. I told you we would come back to him, who, while his ring does mean shoe, which we covered means either scarlet or crimson, could also reference the fourth and final god, Suzaku, who's also known as the Vermilion Bird. Now, for those of you who watch Black Clover, Vermilion sounds slightly familiar, and that's because of the noble family, the Vermilions, who lead the Magical Knight Squad, the Crimson Lions. And all of the members of the Vermilion family have what kind of abilities? If you answered with fire, then you would be correct, because the Vermilion Bird from Chinese mythology is basically a phoenix. That is to say that it's a giant pheasant that's constantly surrounded with or on fire. And this Vermilion Bird is the protector of the South, and Konoha is the most southern country in the entirety of Naruto. And Itachi, as an Uchiha, is known for his great fireball technique, and as a wielder of the MS, is known for his Amaterasu. And thus Itachi is the protector of Konoha, who is constantly surrounded by flames. And thus Itachi's kanji tying him into the Vermilion Bird makes perfect sense. And honestly, Itachi being tied to Suzaku is kind of why I buy that the previous four members of the Akatsuki are tied to the individual Chinese gods. Because while some of the fits aren't exactly perfect, Itachi and Konan's fits are almost too good to deny. And the alternative to their kanji being related to Chinese gods is their kanji just relates to colors. That's kind of incredibly boring. But now that we're done with the God Squad, that leaves us with only 3 remaining members of the Akatsuki, and the reasoning behind their kanji is somewhat less inspirational than the previous 4 members. See, the first out of the God Squad that we'll talk about is Kisame, who wears a yellow ring on his left ring finger, which, mind you, is the marriage finger, and actually that might be the only ring whose placement matters. See, because the kanji on Kisame's ring reads Nanju, which can be translated to South or Southern Star. And for those of you who are scratching your head as to how to try and make a connection between Kisame and the South or a Southern Star, you're gonna have to keep trying for a while, because nothing about Kisame is related to the South at all. The village hidden to the mist is to the west, and Kisame is never like, oh, let's go south. Unless, of course, you want to go the Zetsu route and say that down under the water is south, which it isn't, but if we're assuming that the moon is north, then I guess technically it would be. And therefore, the actual reason that Kisame probably got south on his ring has less to do with Kisame and more to do with Kisame as a partner. See, because let's take into consideration Kisame's partner, Itachi. If Itachi's kanji ties him into Suzaku, the Vermilion Bird, and the protector of the South, then Kisame's kanji reading South is to tie him in to his partner, Itachi, and show that wherever Itachi goes, Kisame goes. This is why the location of Kisame's ring is so important, as it shows us that Kisame, in the sense of the word, is married to Itachi, which I think is cute. But let's get to somebody who's decidedly uncute, because coming up next we have Hidan, whose orange ring he wears on his left index finger. Now, the kanji on Hidan's ring reads 3, or san. Now, this somewhat uninterestingly probably ties into the fact that everything as it pertains to Hidan pops up in 3s. And Hidan activates his sacrifice mode, you know, the mode that makes him all black with white bones bones along his ribcage, Hidan has 3 ribs on each side. On top of this, Hidan comes from the land of hot water, whose symbol is 3 wavy lines. But maybe the most important thing as it pertains to the number 3 in Hidan is the fact that in order to sacrifice somebody to Lord Jashin, he has to draw a triangle within a circle. Triangles are pretty historically known for having 3 points, and thus because 3 is such an important number in Hidan's life, kanji of his ring reads 3. Which leads us to our final entry on the list, Hidan's partner, Kakuzu, wears a blue ring on his left middle finger, kanji of which reads Hoku, or north, or northern star, the exact opposite of Kisame. But this is weird, because technically nobody else in the Akatsuki wears an east or a west ring. While some members of the Akatsuki might have rings that tie them into a god that is a protector of the east or the west, there is no eastern star or western star ring. Now, this is mostly because there's really no such thing as an eastern or a western star, and a lot of these rings are tied into astrology in one way or another. Once again, one could make the argument that nothing about Kakuzu ties him in to the north. Village hidden to the waterfalls is to the west of Konoha, and by far and away is not the most northern country on Naruto's map. That would be the Land of Light, and therefore genuinely I believe that the reason that Kakuzu wears north on his ring is to set him up as a foil to Kisame, as Kisame and Kakuzu's motivations are polar opposites. See, Kisame is the southern star, joined the Akatsuki and stays with the Akatsuki to protect those around him, and Kisame is violently loyal to his partner, Itachi. Kakuzu is pretty much the exact opposite of that. Kakuzu joined the Akatsuki because he believed there'd be a ton of money in it. And prior to Kakuzu being teamed up with Hidan, a person who he quite literally could not kill, Kakuzu had killed 3 partners. And thus Kakuzu stands as the complete opposite of loyalty, as Kakuzu's only loyalty is that cold hard cash. And thus Kakuzu's kanji really has less to do with him and more to do with his relationship to Kisame, which when you consider that he's one of the less interesting members of the Akatsuki, kind of makes sense. But with that, that's every single member of the Akatsuki and what their rings mean. Do you guys have a favorite meaning behind any of the Akatsuki rings? Tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. By the way, this is Blanca. This might be the only video she ever shows up in because we're getting her adopted on Thursday, I believe. Actually, no, she's going to show up in a couple more videos, but who knows if she'll wander in.